Stop 10, Cupola 120. The heavy artillery guns of the fort were found in Cupola 120. The single heavy 300mm thick steel cupola mounted a pair of twin 120mm guns that were capable of engaging targets out to a range of 17,000 yards. Cupola 120 never fired a single round during the assault. The armored cupola was 5 3/4 mm in diameter and weighed 230 tons. Cupola 120 rotated through 360 degrees on 36 conical rollers to allow firing from any direction. The armored dome comprised a 21 centimeter thick outer steel alloy attached to a 4 centimeter iron shell, followed by a 5 centimeter thick layer of felt padding and another 4 centimeter iron shell, to which was attached the 25 centimeter thick inner steel alloy, giving an overall thickness of 59 centimeters. The rate of fire was restricted to no more than 2 rounds per minute for the first 5 minutes and 1 round every 40 seconds for the next 15 minutes. Cupola 120 had a crew of 4 NCOs and 24 soldiers. Trooper Wenzel noticed that the 120-meter guns at Cupola 120 in the center of the fort had not been attacked. Neutralizing Cupola 120 was the responsibility of Section 2, which had not arrived because the tow rope had broken on the fly-in to the fort. Inside the position, Sergeant Cremers, casement commander, saw the gliders land and at 5:30 ordered gunners to attack the Germans. When the Belgians tried to operate the gun's ammunition hoist and rammers, they noticed that the electrical power was not available. The crew frantically tried to fix the problem. Heiner Longer, the glider pilot from Section 5, was escorting prisoners to platoon headquarters, and as he walked past the cupola, the 120mm guns swung around towards him. Shells then landed from Cupola Sud and wounded him in 8 places. Longer ordered the prisoners to lie down as he retrieved a 50-kilogram hollow charge from his glider. He placed the charge on the cupola, lit the fuse, and ran. The explosion caused no visible effect on the turret. A soldier from Section 5, Gritza, came over to investigate. The night prior, he had filled his water bottle with rum, and by this time he was drunk. Gritza climbed on the 120mm guns and straddled them as the Belgians swung them in a circle. Trooper Wenzel appeared and set a 3-kilogram charge in each barrel. The explosion shattered the gun barrels and put the casement out of action. 2 hours later, Sergeant Cremers returned and ordered the gun to resume firing. The first round split one barrel open and filled the casement with smoke. The gun with the split barrel was rendered unsafe to fire. The casement never fired again. You can listen to the following information as you make your way to Stop 11. You will return to Cupola Nord by the same path and take the trail on top of the embankment to your left. The fort, with an authorized strength of 1,322 men, had only 1,198 on the strength report on May 10, 1940. They were roughly separated into 2 groups of 500 artillerymen and 200 technical and administrative workers. Major Jean-Fritz Lucien Jaltran commanded the fort. Armament of the fort was divided into 2 batteries. Battery 1 was composed of the artillery cupolas and casements, while Battery 2 focused on the defensive blocks. The 2 batteries had 2 identical watches of 250 men that rotated every 7 days. The on-duty watch lived in the underground barracks within the fort, while the off-duty watch lived in the barracks at the village of Wonk, 4 miles from the fort. This was a deliberate move to ensure that the off-duty gunners would not be within range of the target area of a surprise bombing attack on the fort. The downside was, of course, that the full complement of defenders would take considerable time to assemble, march to the fort, and reinforce the on-duty watch already manning the fort's bunkers and casements. The third group consisted of the fort's 200 command, technical, and administrative soldiers who worked routine hours in and around the fort. They provided combat support and administrative functions ranging from medics through signalers to repair technicians. In addition to some more senior officers of the 2 batteries, A high proportion of the command and admin group had local houses, living with their families in the surrounding villages. Though not operationally desirable, soldiers living out is an inevitable result of a long-term manning of a static defensive position. In theory, the fort's wartime establishment totaled 1,185 men, under the command of a major, but Eben Emael was not a popular or healthy posting, and the prolonged phony war meant that on May 10, 1940, the fort was seriously undermanned. First, there were sick men with throat and chest problems attributed to the dusty atmosphere inside the fort. Secondly, the post strength was down about 100 gunners, mainly because men whose period of conscription had ended and were discharged without replacement. A part of this deficiency of 100 men was also because important workers such as farmers and miners were released back to civilian life. Finally, a leave ban had eventually been lifted on May 9th, allowing another 100 men due leave to promptly set off home. With other men sent home on compassionate leave, the garrison was at least 250 men below operational strength at its critical moment in history. A posting to the Regiment de Fortress de Liege was considered to be an unglamorous posting and not the choice of an ambitious soldier. In addition, a static unit was a natural place to post older soldiers and those of lower physical capacity. It should be pointed out that while the fort was not generally a popular posting, particularly among the conscripts, a number of permanent regular army officers and NCOs had been at the fort for years, some since its first gun positions were commissioned before the construction was completed. While these men clearly knew the fort inside and out and exactly how it worked, there have been persistent accusations that most were more or less than inspired leaders. The state of training among the gun crews was not particularly high. The turnover of conscripts was a perennial problem which is essential to complete training. Such was the pressure on the Belgian artillery school that they had no time to address the training needs of the fortress artillery. Consequently, a significant proportion of gun crews had not actually fired a live round, and their knowledge was based on theory and limited gun exercises. The morale of Eben Emael garrison is generally considered to have been low, with the fort being nicknamed the Education Center. Life as a fortress artilleryman was dull, repetitive, and unhealthy, without natural light and with few recreational opportunities. The months spent trying to maintain soldiers at a high state of readiness, particularly with the repeated false alarms over the winter of the phony war, had had its effect. Inevitably, boredom had set in, corners were being cut to make life easier, and the initial high state of readiness was, in practice, progressively watered down. Another significant weakness in the garrison was that the soldiers were nearly all artillerymen, and apart from the basic drill with a Belgian copy of the Mauser rifle, had no training in infantry fighting or tactics. Although this was one aspect of the military training that the garrison could have practiced on and around the fort, the possibility was ignored. These cumulative circumstances allowed officers and men to sink into a fortress mentality. Consequently, counterattack plans for Eben Emael relied on the infantry from surrounding divisions being diverted from their task of holding the Albert Canal. To make matters worse, there were no direct communications with the infantry elements of the divisions tasked with mounting counterattacks, as all messages had to be relayed through the artillery chain of command or headquarters Regiment de Fortress de Liege. This factor was to have a profound effect on the outcome of the battle. You can now listen to Stop 11, V's 1. As you proceed along the berm, you will see and come to V's 1. This casement will have the 3 artillery ports that you saw earlier in the tour.